Paul Mortimer Lee, who's Global Head of Market Economics at BNP Paribas. He joins us on the show from London now. Paul, to begin with, what would you say is the bigger worry for the markets today, France or Greece?
I think it's Greece, and I think you see that quite clearly if you look at the 10-year bond spread between those two countries and Germany. France has hardly moved, and Greece moved out 200 basis points yesterday and another 30 basis points today. So it looks to be Greece is the bigger worry, and I think that's quite right, because there's much more uncertainty about where we're going in Greece.
Now, Paul, the International Institute of Finance is only the latest among an increasing chorus of voices criticizing Europe for being too focused on austerity. But what's the way out of here?
Well, there's a question about two things with the austerity. One is where we're going, and so long-run credibility of targets is very important that governments maintain that. And there's the speed at which you get there. And unfortunately, the track record of some of the European governments is so bad that to keep the credibility about where you're going, you probably have to go a little bit too quickly at the beginning. And there's a danger that if people ease back a bit, then there will be a fear that this meant that ultimately we'd end up at a much worse place in terms of debt sustainability. So I think the only way really we can move forward is one, have more structural reform, growth enhancing measures that have big credibility. Two, to enhance the credibility of where we're going fiscally. So adoption of fiscal councils, for example, in Spain would be a good thing.
Now, Paul, Spain is planning to pump in billions of dollars of taxpayer money into the country's third biggest bank by assets to save it from a collapse. Now, is this only a sign of things to come? And is it safe to assume that Spain seeking an international bailout is maybe only weeks away?
Well, I think, one of the lessons of Bankia that was formed by merging several smaller caja is you put several bad banks together, you don't end up with a good bank. You end up with a much bigger bad bank, and that's not worked. And really, it underlines what the market thinks about Spain, really, that the banking problem has not been fully addressed, and there needs to be quite a lot more capital pumped into Spain's banks overall, the system overall. And now, for Spain to do that individually, I think is quite tough, because, as we've seen, it's struggling to issue its own debt on the international markets to fund its budget deficit and maturities, and so therefore to have to fund a substantial further injection of capital into the banks is probably a bridge too far. So it probably does need some sort of international aid to do that, but it's reluctant to ask for that at the moment.
Now, Paul, there are some who argue that Greece exiting from the euro would actually be a positive for the euro. Would you agree? And do you believe the process of its exit could be much more chaotic than most expect?
I think it could be very chaotic indeed, because clearly at the moment Greece is relying on international money to help fund its budget deficit. If it leaves the Eurozone, then there'll be at least a hiatus in that flow of international money. And what they would have to do is to print money to fund the government. We'd see a sharp depreciation of the currency. I'm sure that public sector workers and others would demand higher wages. What we'd end up with is a bigger, sharper recession than we've got at the moment, but with much more inflation. And as we've seen in Greece, one of the great problems is the divisions within society, which is why they're finding it so difficult to form a government. And so I think leaving the euro would lead to a chaotic and very dangerous interlude in Greece's political and economic outlook. And I don't think that would be good for the Eurozone at all. I also think that many people in the markets would speculate, if Greece has gone today, who goes tomorrow?
Right. Paul Mortimer Lee, many thanks for coming in on the show with your view on really what the challenges ahead for the Eurozone are, and indeed talking to us about Spain, Greece and even France, the three problem areas as things stand today.